In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the mask with elastic loops and a nose wire. So you'll need 2 pieces of elastic. I would say 8-inch is a good length to start with, and then a piece of wire. I've got aluminum wire that I bought at the dollar store in the floral department. I believe they also have it at Home Depot, or you can use whatever else you use. So the elastic is a little too short to lie down properly to attach to the mask, so I'd like to put a little gusset, or we'll call it a pleat, in there. I use E6000 glue, or you could use fabric glue, about 3/8 of an inch from each corner on the ends. And then remember that you're going to lay the elastic not sticking out but sticking in, because you're going to flip it inside out. So for my first try here, I was putting the elastic down on top of the glue, and the problem was it was a little too far apart, so it kept pulling. See, it's pulling it at an angle like that. So that didn't work, so I decided to go ahead and let's make a bigger pleat in the center to bring those ends closer together, and that worked out perfectly. So I was able to put both pieces of elastic on and let them dry, and I think it took an hour maybe. That glue dries fast. I don't know about fabric glue. I haven't used it before, but I had this in my garage and it works well. So now it's been an hour, it's dry, and I'm going to go ahead and pin the top piece on. Now I've decided to leave the pleat in there for right now. I don't know that it matters. I could have taken the pins out, but sometimes excuse me, I just leave the pleats in. And so I'm stitching these 2 corners in place. I'm pinning them in place, pinning right on top of the elastic. Each corner. And then I'll take the pins out of the pleat underneath there. And that opens up flat. And now I'm going to pin along the side, right in the center, lining up the centers, just so they stay lined up when I'm stitching. All right, so I went ahead and stitched all the way around, about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. That isn't a crucial dimension. I tend to use the edge of my presser foot as a guide, and I think it's 1/4 inch. So you just stitch all the way around and leave 1 1/4 inch opening or so, and that's where you'll be turning it inside out. I'm going to take your scissors and clip off the corners, so that when it turns inside out, those corners can go as square as possible. And now you're going to take, and I usually put my thumb inside and kind of squish it down, but you can reach inside and grab that elastic and use that to help you pull your corners out. So it works great because the elastic is almost right up to each corner. So I'm able to use both sets of elastic and pull. Then I put it on my ironing board and press it real well. But before I do that, I like to take, either I use my seam ripper in the corner just to pull that out, or I've got I don't know what they call this, a turner or corner point. You can use one of those to get into your corners, as I said, or I'll use the blunt end, or the rounded edge of the seam ripper, and just very carefully pull. Be real careful, of course, and then press it. So you've got a nice crisp edge. The opening where you turned it isn't an issue at all. It's there and you can't even see it. All right, so this is another sample that I'd made up. This one has an adjustable ear loop, which I will talk about later. But what we're going to do is take the markings from the pattern. I transferred them onto a sheet of paper. It's not necessary. You could use the pattern directly. Line it up with the edge. The right side is the top, the left side is the bottom of the mask. And it doesn't matter ahead of time which is which. You just want to determine that and then stick with it. So we're making the right side the top. Putting pins in at each of these markings. And we'll do that all the way down. A little bit more of a gap or distance between the top and that first pin compared to the bottom. And then we're doing the same thing on the other side. And this is going to allow us to make those pleats. Okay, so now if you look, we've got them pinned, the pins in place, and you can see I've got it pinned on the other side already. So I'm taking the top, the pin that's on the right side, which is the top of the mask, matching it up with the one closest to it and making a fold, and then running that, making that pleat and flipping the fold in the back towards the top of the mask. Okay, and then do it to the next pin, match it up with the pin closest to it, bring that, keep everything nice and straight. You can take those extra pins out. And then the last one, make the fold, put the fold in the back, flip it up towards the top. It looks good. Runs across, you can see how it's going to open up and make for a nice mask. Now the thing is, I flipped it back, and I usually like to check and make sure they're the same. You see the one on the bottom, the one on the left or the bottom, it was a little bit narrower, so I'm pulling this in just a bit. It doesn't take much. See, now it's even. All right, now we're going to be sewing this. This is the top. We're going to make the casing. There's the, you can see the flap down, or the first fold or pleat down. We're going to sew up from the bottom, back down along the bottom edge, up the side, over and back down, and then back up again, and then across the top to make the casing. That will hold the wire. And stitch it then across to close up a hole. With a hole that I had actually made with the seam ripper. You're going to gently put your seam ripper in, very, very carefully cut a couple of threads there, which I had actually done before I shot this. All right, so I'm turning it around. This is coming up from the bottom right corner. And I'm in about 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Keeping everything straight and lined up. You want to keep checking and making sure that those folds underneath are not getting pulled backwards by those feed dogs. So I'm just, this part of the process, I'm always making sure that things are laying flat. You can see I had some extra pins sticking out of the side here. Those were not supposed to be there. It's funny, you get so focused you don't even notice, but there's still one. There's a pin there on the left that I don't know if it was something I had in before. I just keep pulling the pins out. Sometimes I'll leave them in if I want them to hold the fabric in place while I'm walking over it carefully. I think that's why the one pin is left there. I left it in. Come across about 1/8 of an inch from the top, and then end 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Turn it, and it should, yeah, it comes down nice, right next to that seam. So the edge of my presser foot is right on that seam, the seam that was already sewn, stitching line. And then very carefully as I'm coming down, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, pull that pin out. Just keep everything flat and nice and even. And there we go. All right, now this, the bottom of the mask, we go 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way across, ending 3/8 of an inch from the other edge. Again, just very carefully feeding the fabric through, make sure that the folds stay nice and flat. These are the things that will make it look professional. using my seam ripper just to kind of feed it in there. Now we're an 1/8 of an inch. This last one is a little tricky for some reason. So you can use that elastic to pull that corner back. See, I picked up my presser foot and moved it over just a smidge to make sure that I was still in the right spot. Okay, so now I'm coming back up. I could stop it here. I could cut the threads and start again at the top, but rather than do that, I'm just going to ride the seam right up to the top edge, and I end about a little over 1/4 of an inch, but you can see I'm right on top of the seam. See how nice that looks? You can't even see that. There's a double seam there, double stitching line. You can't see it. So now I'm going to go across and make my casing for the wire, and I'm just a smidge over 1/4 inch from the edge. Kind of depends on the thickness of your wire. This seems to work well for the wire that I use. It kind of depends on what you can find. So I'm just going to put the needle in there on that stitching line. Now you can see here I've got that hole. That's where the wire is going in. And then pull it down. Kind of push. See, I'm pushing it with my left finger. I'm holding the wire down and then sliding the fabric down. And there's the end of the wire right there. Slide that fabric down as far as I can so that I can get my presser foot up and stitch that hole closed. So that's what we want to do now, see the hole. Now one thing you want to be careful of is, depending on how much clearance you have over to here, I have enough clearance just, but if you don't, another way to do this is to have your thing swing around front and then go in reverse back to that back edge. Then you don't have to worry about that mask and with the wire in it clearing that underside or the right side of the opening on your machine. I'm stitching across. Try to use rather small stitches to close up that hole and back tack it. And there you go. Trim off all the threads, and really you should only have 4 threads. And there it is. Now you could use and wear this either way. I just recommend that you'd wash it in between wearings, because if you have the germs on the inside, you wouldn't want to take it off, flip it over, and use it the opposite way. But here's how I bend my wire. I go right in the center and bend the part that's going to go over your nose. And then you just make a gentle curve that would follow the cheeks on either side. And that's how you wear it. Now, if you want to wear it on the opposite or the inside, if you gently turn that wire around in there without straightening it, see, you can get it so that it'll work from the back side as well. I wouldn't recommend straightening and rebending very many times, because wire doesn't like that and it'll eventually break. Okay, now here I told you that I'd show you what we can do if you want to have ear loops that will fit different people. I mean, sometimes you're making it for someone you don't know the size of their head and how much distance you need. I bought these on Amazon. Now my pack had 100 of them, 50 white and 50 black. And they work really well, and they're soft. They aren't a real tight elastic. They work very well. I don't know if you can buy a smaller pack than that. It's worth looking into though. So you'll adjust that so that it works behind your ear. But you just place it in there the same way you did your elastic, and it'll go in right into that at the beginning of the project.